Hello, and I hope you're staying safe and staying well wherever you are. Thanks very much for joining me for another of my weekday evening readings from my books. At the minute, I'm reading through Breadboy, which is my second memoir, which tells the story of being a teenage boy delivering the bread on a bread van every Saturday morning in Belfast it goes from 1977 to 1980. And we're up to chapter 11 tonight, would you believe? And this evening's chapter, I think I want to give you a little bit warning because I know these are difficult times for many people. This gets a little bit sad at the end. There's a bit of crack at the start, but it gets a bit sad at the end. Just want to warn you about that before I start reading it. So it's a chapter in Breadboy 11, chapter 11, and it's entitled Fads, Music and Sadness. I loved gadgets. So I did. This was one thing I had in common with my father. I didn't share his love of going fishing because it involved unnecessary violence against one of God's wee creatures. I couldn't match his proficiency in DIY because I always hammered my thumb. I was unable to join in his zeal for atheism because I was too well saved. And although I inhaled his Hamlet cigar smoke while laughing at the Eric Sykes show on UTV, I never really shared his chain smoking habit either. Dad was always up to some new hobby, from growing tomatoes in his rickety greenhouse to cooking tasty Chinese food in the kitchen. One day, he was engraving metal with the machine he had borrowed from the foundry, and the next day he was brewing his own beer in a bucket beside the nails in the garage. I could barely keep up with every fast passing craze. My mother described each hobby as your father's latest wee notion and correctly predicted that all new interests would pass in a matter of months. My granny was less understanding. When Dad brought home a Japanese bonsai tree kit, she said, "Look at Buck Alec. He never knows what to be at. No son-of-law of mine should be sporting the Japs after what they done to us in the war." I knew the Japanese were cruel to prisoners of war in black and white movies, and I accepted they had made us drop atomic bombs on two of their cities. But 30 years on, I thought my granny should give Japanese people another chance, because now they liked ABBA and made brilliant Godzilla cartoons. Dad's fads were fascinating, but I sometimes wondered if these short-lived hobbies were just a sign that he was bored doing the same job at the foundry every day for 30 years. When his latest interest involved anything electronic with buttons, I joined in enthusiastically. My father rarely purchased anything from the Great Universal Club book, but he thumbed through the electronic pages nearly as often as my wee brother scoured the toys pages, and almost as regularly as I looked at the section with nice ladies in bras. So I was not too surprised when one day a box from the club book arrived at our house containing a newfangled white plastic metal detector. It cost him 20 weeks at 99p, and he promised my mother he would stop chain smoking to pay for it. Every Sunday afternoon, we went up the fields of Divis Mountain to look for ancient coins and swords. He used to find old clay pipes and Stone Age arrowheads up there, near an ancient flint quarry and a cave where it was rumoured the UDA had their planning meetings. My father was clearly the foremost archaeologist on the Black Mountain, but unfortunately the metal detector rarely buzzed, and even when it did, he only ever found old sixpences and pennies from before we went decimal. One Sunday afternoon, I accompanied him to the beach at Malile to search for ancient coins dropped by careless Vikings and Romans. My school history books mentioned neither of these invaders raping and pillaging in Malile. Maybe they had heard about the tartan gangs during the 12th fortnight. Dad allowed me to hold the metal detector and switch on the buttons so that a little red light came on and it made a buzzing noise, like a lightsaber in Star Wars. When I told him I felt like a Jedi Knight seeking out hidden treasure on the Death Star, He told me to stop being such an old blather. I wielded the amazing white plastic metal detector along the surface of the beach, over sand and shells, across clumps of smelly seaweed, and over the faded yellow plastic of discarded Tito cheese and onion crisp bags. All of a sudden, the mild buzzing tone increased to a high-pitched electronic scream, like when the Daleks lost their temper and shouted, "Exterminate! Exterminate!" at the doctor. My father immediately began digging with the garden trowel he had brought along for such a discovery as this. Within seconds, he was 10 inches down into the sand. "Is it Roman or Viking?" I asked excitedly. "I'm not sure yet," replied Dad. I was so proud of my archaeologist father. He reminded me of those posh Englishmen in pith helmets that dug up the scary mummy that lived in the Ulster Museum. But our excitement was short-lived. A disappointed silence fell on the beach as the last few trowelfuls of wet sand revealed a crushed, corroded Harp lager can. The seagulls above us screeched as if they had been watching the whole drama, and they were mocking us now. "But maybe it's an old one," I said, attempting to revive some archaeological interest. However, once we had fully retrieved the artifact, a closer archaeological analysis revealed a price sticker from the wine lodge, indicating that the object was most likely buried circa 1977 during a binge on the beach after the bonfire on the 11th of July. So that's the first gadget. Let's say hello to a few people. Thanks for joining me. Hello, Alan McLean, and good to have you as usual, Alan. And Nigel McCombs, another regular. Hi, Stephanie Houston, and how you doing, Stephanie? Hope you're all keeping well there. Hi, Evelyn Brown, and good to have you along again, Evelyn. And hello, David Blevins. Hope you're doing well. And Kenneth Glenville, nothing like making the live reads. Yes, good to have you with me. I'm doing it live. Thank you, Kenneth. And hello, Anne Riding. Good evening, Jim Poole. How are you doing? Hello, Wilkins. How are you? Hope you're all doing well there. And Cheryl McClure and Sadie Hanna and Michael McKinley Sr. Hi, Jeremy Skillen. And Jim, I think Jeremy broke the records of coming to see the Paperboy musical the most times of anyone, I think. Jeremy and Lydia. Hi, Jim Livingston. Hello, Betty O'Riordan. Lovely to have you along again. And Rosaline Hartley. Hope you're getting a break and enjoying the reading tonight. Hi, Andy McCauley and the lovely Leslie McCauley from up the country, who's down the stairs. Hi, Ian Parsley and Oliver Core. Smiler says hello, says Cheryl. Yes, I got his name right this time. I'm Tubbs and he's Smiler. I have to remember these nicknames properly from our student days. That's the next book, all grown up. Hello, Neve. Thanks for joining us. You're another regular. And Richard and Susan. Lovely to have you along, Susan. And hi, Anne Kirk as well. And Angela and Keith Montgomery. Great to have you all here. So I'm going to continue this chapter about my dad's gadgets. As I said earlier, this chapter ends on a sad note, but I just want to let you know that. Anyway, thankfully, there was one other new gadget my father and I both loved that never disappointed. One day, he arrived home with a big box in the boot of the Ford Escort respray, and I noticed it said, "Handle with care," on the side. Dad proudly carried the mysterious package into the good room and gathered the whole family around it on the shag pile. "I got us a surprise with my overtime," he announced. I was instantly excited, although I had to dismiss my initial hope that it might be a puppy, because there were no holes in the box to let the wee dog breathe. And with my track record, I was now very sensitive to animal welfare. My father slowly opened the box to reveal a treasure chest of polystyrene. My wee brother began to play with this crumbling white packaging, but he got a clip round the ear because when he scraped Evel Knievel's plastic motorbike against the polystyrene, it produced a horrible sound that my mother said would make her nerves bad. The layers of polystyrene were gradually removed to unveil an amazing black plastic record player with a built-in radio and cassette player. This astonishing work of electronic engineering elicited a collective gasp from the gathered family. The wondrous machine had 2 speakers with black sponge on it, and wires so long you could place 1 speaker on either side of the good room, a full 10 feet apart. Yes, the Macaulays now had an amazing black plastic stereo. How many families could say they had a colour TV and a stereo? Wait until I tell Timothy Longsley. My father smiled delightedly when he saw the wide eyes of his 3 boys. Alice Cooper in stereo, class, cried my big brother. Ah, Cliff Richard in stereo, lovely, cried my mother. Does Ralph Harris, oh dear, that's not saying about Ralph Harris, leave that bit out. For a second, I glanced sadly at the old 1950s stereogram that had served us so well, realising that it was now heading for the garage and maybe even the 11th Boney. But then I realised what the arrival of the new stereo really meant. ABBA in stereo, I cried. You big fruit, responded my big brother. Unfortunately, this latest insult forced me to drop my pacifist principles momentarily, and I hit my big brother across the head with one of his Rod Stewart LPs. A fight ensued in which my big brother threw me down on the floor very roughly. I was saved from serious injury by the polystyrene packing, but I realised the beautiful family moment had been ended when my father stood up and shouted, "You ungrateful wee shites!" My big brother and I got the strap, and we were sent to our bedroom for the rest of the night. This was a cruel punishment, because we shared a room, and so we had to spend the rest of the night sulking together with our backs to each other. The stereo sounds of Cliff Richard, Tammy Wynette wafted up the stairs from the 2 speakers in the good room. Not even the wood chip wallpaper in the sitting room could dampen this glorious new stereo sound. It wasn't fair. Everyone knew that stereos weren't invented for old-fashioned music. I was so raging, I nearly said fuck out loud. But I resisted because if my big brother ever caught me swearing, he would say, "Oh, aye, you're not so good living now, so you're not." The next day, when I finally got a go on our amazing new black plastic stereo, I was enthralled to hear Agnetha and Frida magically emerging from different speakers at the same time with the name of the game. The other exciting feature of this new wonder gadget was being able to record onto a cassette directly from the radio or the record player. The outcome of this innovation was now I could record the top 40 countdown on Radio 1 on a Sunday night without having to hold my old cassette recorder microphone up to the wee speaker on my transistor radio. I could stop worrying about recording my mother walking in and ordering me up the stairs to tidy my room over the top of the rivers of Babylon. Never again would everyone laugh when I play back the recording without fast forwarding being told off by my mammy. In spite of the embarrassment my transistor radio had caused me, I loved it. I'm going to tell you more about that in a minute. In the meantime, hello to Damien in Edinburgh. Hope you're well, Damien. Rosaline says, no glass of wine tonight while listening to you back on. Oh, you're back on nights. Well, I hope you enjoy it without wine tonight, Rosaline, and all the best for all you're doing. Keeping things safe for the rest of us. Hi, Sheila. Lovely to have you, Sheila. Hey there. Thank you so much for the welcome. Respite. Best to Leslie and the girls. Hello. Hope you're well, Sheila, there in Pennsylvania. Hello, Walter Ellis. And hello. Oh, there's my friend Shamir Wiseman in Kampala, Uganda. I hope you're all doing well there. I know you guys are doing a brilliant job in Kosovo to help people who have no food. Hi, Francis McGrath. Lovely to have you along. And yes, Susan, did you remember listening to the top 40 on the radio on a Sunday night too? I think it was illegal to record it, but sure, we all recorded it. Hi, Naba Grace. God bless you too. So, in spite of the embarrassment my transistor radio had caused me, I loved it. It was small and mustard with a plastic handle. You didn't have to plug it in because it ran on batteries that lasted for ages. It went everywhere with me. I kept it safely in the pocket of my duffel coat on the way to school. and listen to Dave Lee Travis playing Don't Cry for Me, Argentina on Radio 1 at the bus stop. On Saturday mornings, if I had a lengthy walk up and down the stairs in the flats, and so long as I had one hand free of bread, I could reach into my duffel coat pocket and click the on switch to snatch a brief listen to the new Brotherhood of Man single on Downtown Radio. Under the sheets in bed at night, I could listen to Emperor Roscoe playing the latest power play after the news headlines on Radio Luxembourg. The problem with constantly listening to my transistor radio, however, was the news. Every station I listened to interrupted the latest hits once an hour with the news headlines. And Northern Ireland was always on the news, and it was always bad news. I hated living in the middle of all this fighting, and I prayed for all the violence and hatred to end, but it never stopped. And what could I do? Sure, nobody would listen to a pacifist Breadboy from Ballygomartin. I wanted to leave Belfast and escape from bad news and bombers and gunmen. I wanted to grow up somewhere else with no soldiers and no paramilitaries. It was dead scary to walk past a parked car with its lights on in case it blew up, and I hated being searched for bombs at the door of every shop. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford to emigrate because a full year of Breadboy tips would barely raise sufficient funds to buy a ticket to the Isle of Man. My father seriously considered moving us away from Belfast to Carrickfergus or Australia. We were very close to leaving a couple of times, but he could never see it through. One terrible day, as I was listening to my mustard transistor radio, playing the latest hits, I heard on the news that the IRA had blown up the Lamont House Hotel and killed a lot of people from a dog club. It was horrible. The people were all burned. How did the provost think killing all those poor people would help them get their way? Did they not want dog lovers in a united Ireland? Then I had to listen to news reports about a gang of men from the Shankill Road who roamed around the streets near my school and picked up people and murdered them just for being Catholics. They tortured those people like in your worst nightmare. Did they really think cutting up Catholics would help us stay British? The newsreaders always called them the Shankill Butchers, and this made everyone from the Shankill sound like we were evil murderers from a bloody horror movie. Then things came much closer to home. One evening, as my family was finishing our smash and fish fingers and Crossroads was ending, we heard 4 loud bangs in the street outside. I'd never heard gunfire so close before. Everyone ran out into the street. One of our neighbours, Mr. Oliver, was slumped over the wheel of his car, parked just outside his house. Another car, with men cheering out the windows, was speeding off down the street. Mrs. Oliver was frozen in the passenger seat, her eyes staring straight ahead. Her husband had just been shot 4 times in the chest. Mr. Oliver was a shopkeeper on the road, and he was still wearing his white shop coat. He liked fishing. There were 4 small, bright red circles across the front of his white coat. Mr. Oliver had turned one of the bushes in his front garden into a big rooster with his hedge clippers. No one in our street had ever seen a gardener quite like him. My father helped Mrs. Oliver out of the car and went back inside to phone the ambulance and the RUC. Auntie Mabel carried out one of her good dining room chairs and set it on the pavement. Mrs. Oliver sat in the chair, rocking backwards and forwards and crying a crescendo of painful wails from the depths of her heart. Mr. and Mrs. Oliver had grown-up children who lived across town. The red circles on Mr. Oliver's shopcoat grew wider and wider until they all joined together into one pure red, bloody circle. My mother jumped into the back seat of the car. She had turned up the trousers on Mr. Oliver's good suit for a dinner dance. My mother put one arm around him and stroked and patted his head gently. Mr. Oliver always wore brill cream to slick his hair back like men in the 50s. I could hear my mother telling him he was all right, love, so he was, and Mrs. Oliver was okay. I heard her tell him that the ambulance would be here very soon and everything would be all right, love, so it would. His eyes were closed. Mr. Oliver always wore a vest and braces and a tie under his shop coat. Deep red blood came flowing down his nose and from his mouth. Mr. Oliver died in my mother's arms. Within an hour, our street was on the news. We were on Downtown Radio and Radio Ulster. We were even on News at 10 after one of Big Ben's dongs. As I lay in bed that night, I tuned my mustard transistor radio to every radio station I could find. From Dublin to London, from Athlone to Brussels, I heard my street on every news bulletin. I listened to the distant clatter of endless cups of tea being prepared by my mother downstairs in the kitchen, in the vain hope that a wee cup of tea for all the traumatised neighbours would make everything all right. So I turned up the volume of my transistor radio and retreated under the sheets to drown out the desperate muffled conversations below. You don't know or you don't realise how bad it is till it comes to your own door, was the phrase I heard repeatedly above the whistles and crackles as I switched radio stations and channels. I lay there for hours listening to them all report in different accents the news of a shopkeeper shot dead in the Upper Shankill in Belfast. It was as if by hearing the bad news again and again, confirmed by every radio station, that the reality of what I had just experienced would finally sink in. I detested this country. All this hatred and fighting was too much to bear. I wanted Mr. Oliver to be still alive and serving his customers and loving his family. I longed to hear the sound of Mrs. Oliver calling them in from their front garden for his dinner on a summer's day. I didn't want to hear any more about who started it and how it was always the other side's fault. I wanted to leave these shores forever. I wanted to live in a place where they didn't shoot shopkeepers in front of their wives. I wanted to live in a place where I wanted to move to another country where at least they didn't cheer after they'd shot you 4 times in the chest. I wanted all the DJs on my radio to forget about the news and replace it with an extra track from Saturday Night Fever or the theme from Star Wars. I would rather live in a country where they played an Elvis medley instead of telling us more and more bad news. I wanted Emperor Roscoe and DLT and Big T to drown out all the hatred and all the blood with music about love and adventure and dancing. When I fell asleep that night, I dreamt of moving abroad on a big ship to a very clean city in Canada, surrounded by miles and miles of prairies from my geography book. No one got cut up and tortured because of their religion, and dog lovers were not legitimate targets. The next day at school, I didn't talk about my murdered neighbour. I was too ashamed because the worst things always happened in the worst areas. Nobody noticed, but deep down, I was heartbroken. So there you are. That is chapter 10, or chapter 11, I should say. Chapter 11 of Breadboy. Thank you very much, as usual, for joining me. Just say hello to a few more people before I go. Hi, Brian Smith and Alan Sheeran. You're Stephanie Houston. Your first transistor radio was a wee Sanyo. I think mine was a Sanyo as well. And you listen to Radio Luxembourg as well. Thanks, everyone. Hi to Bobby McGee and Dawn and Ruth and Maureen. Hi, Margie in Pennsylvania. Hello, Michael. And hi, Patrick as well. And Marty McCauley and Thomas Lynham. Thank you very much to all of you. I hope you enjoyed the reading this evening. I'll be back again same time tomorrow night for another chapter from Breadboy. In the meantime, stay well, stay safe, and stay positive.